Speak. Hello. All right. Testing.
Do we have a quorum? I didn't know.
You want to trade?
We're going to call the meeting to order. We have a very, very long agenda, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So please take your seats. We're late as it is. And thank you, technical staff, for turning on our microphones. I appreciate that. So I'd like to call tonight's roundtable meeting to order. James, may we have the roll call, please?
City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors, City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office, City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission,
Ivar Sataro.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, CCAG Airport Land Use Commission, Town of Atherton,
Elizabeth Lewis.
City of Belmont, City of Brisbane,
Terry O'Connell.
City of Burlingame,
Ricardo Ortiz.
City of Daly City, City of Foster City, City of Half Moon Bay, Town of Hillsborough,
Al Royce.
City of Menlo Park, City of Millbrae,
Ann Schneider.
City of Pacifica,
Sue Degree.
Town of Portola Valley,
Ann Wengert.
City of Redwood City, City of San Bruno,
Marty Medina.
City of San Carlos,
Ron Collins.
City of San Mateo, City of South San Francisco,
Mark Adiego.
and Town of Woodside. Madam Chair, we do not have a quorum. We have 11, so one short. I do know that Supervisor Dave Pine was planning to attend, so as long as we maybe take the action items later and move on
Thank
to
you.
other items.
Thank you very much. So without a quorum, we cannot take action on any of the items, but we can move forward with the meat of our agenda, which is information and Q&A with the FAA. I'd like to take this minute to introduce to everyone some of our guests and distinguished members. Of course, we're always very pleased that Congresswoman Jackie Spears, Senior Advisor in all things air and technical, is here with us. Kathleen Wentworth, thank you for being here with us tonight. We have John Ballesteros, who is a Chief External Affairs Officer for San Francisco Airport, with us tonight, so thank you for being here. Also, John Bergener, who is the Airport Planning Director of San Francisco Airport. We are exceedingly happy to have two members of the FAA with us tonight. This is the second meeting in a row that we've had representatives from the FAA to talk with us. We have given them questions in advance, and they are prepared to speak to us. So there's Mindy Wright. She's National Airspace Analytics and Environmental Operations Support Group. And some of us here on the roundtable, member Ann Wengert and I, for sure, Mark Adiego, and a number of the other members who were on the Select Committee remember Mindy in 2016, 2017, when we were working on the Congressional Select Committee. And we are welcome. We're really happy that you're here with us. With her is Barry Davis. So Barry, I never really got your complete title, but I understand that you do a lot of work in the San Diego airport area, and you I had a conversation with you a few months ago on a conference call, so I'm very happy that you're here with us. Thank you. If there's any other airport airline representative that I missed, my apologies. I thought we were having several of the airline representatives with us tonight also. So at this time, I'm going to take, I only have two, well, actually, probably only one public speaker for items that are not on the agenda. And the rest of the public speaker cards I have, I believe, are referring to item number 11. I'm going to ask Tom Lee is from Millbrae. Are you wanting to speak on the item number 11, which is the ground-based noise committee?
It is not on item 11.
Is
More on overhead noise.
do you think your item is on the agenda? Because this part of the meeting is for items that are not on the agenda. So why don't you check on that? And I'm going to ask Doreen Gatelli, South San Francisco, to come. And you have 2 minutes, Doreen. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's on. Okay. Good evening, Roundtable members and everybody. Since 2014, when I first came to these meetings, I had a goal. And that goal was to inspire the Roundtable to develop an airport retrofit repair fund, one that was available to folks whom had the airport retrofits in their homes and had experienced a failure to such retrofits. And for many years, I would come up here and bring up the same subject, and I must have sounded like a broken record, but I was determined and felt very passionate that my 101-inch front window had failed. There sure must have been others stuck in the same mess. If the airport was going to insist on driving us nuts with all the machines in the air, they might as well try to keep us somewhat happy by keeping our homes quiet, because it sure seems that the planes aren't getting any quieter. However, now that such a plan is now in effect, there is a new dilemma, trying to get through on that website. I've been experiencing like a standing in line. Not really what I had hoped for, because I kind of find it humorous to think that I would have been the first in line, the person whom had inspired the idea. Now probably won't get a chance to reap the benefits. My father helped me pay for my new window. And when I was begging for his help, I felt sure that a reimbursement of some sort was almost a slam dunk. It's funny, the public comes here to these meetings in hopes of a win, but it's really the airport that usually wins, financially that is. In the meantime, we have to put up with the monsters in the sky flying over our houses, making unbelievable loud noises and shaking our houses and dumping exhaust on our vegetation, our cars, even our kids. Just like what a joke the complaint system is. I have used it. I've tried to encourage my neighbors to call, but they only say, well, why bother going up against the airport? You know you can't win. And now I'm starting to think they're right. My father is battling cancer right now, and his outcome is uncertain. But tonight I would like to go home and tell my dad that the goal is in my favor.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you. I'm welcoming a couple more members, Diane Pappen, San Mateo, and Supervisor Pine, and I think Doug Kim, Belmont, snuck in. Oh, there he is. Thank you. So we do have a full quorum, and we will be able to take all the action that we need to take. So we are going to revise our agenda order today because our special guest, one member, has to go catch a plane and fly away. And so I'm going to move up item number 8 to be the next agenda item. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to our technical consultant, Gene Rundell, and he and Bert are going to tee up the questions. I believe we have some graphics, so Bert is going to tee up the graphic, and then Gene, if you could take over from here. Thank you. If you are looking at your agenda packet, the questions that we are going to be referring to are on page 56 in your agenda packet.
Okay. No. Okay, so the first question for this roundtable meeting that we posed to the FAA related to the south arrivals route terminating east of the bay to runway 28 right. And the graphic that you have up there is showing those procedures. FAA response was that they would not address, and the reasons were focused, we felt, on daytime operations procedures rather than nighttime. The request was really to attempt to do these procedures at night when traffic volumes throughout the Bay Area are extremely low. So first question is, why is it not possible to do these procedures, such as a surfer could terminate east of the bay at night when the volumes are low? And second part of that is, what is required for the FAA to reconsider this request?
Yes. So Mindy, yeah, and Barry, if you, yeah, go up to the podium.
We also do have some graphics as well, Bird. No, I mean, either way, it's up to you all. It's a PDF.
Page display, I think.
So these are just the questions that he had posed to us, reference that, and then the next slide has the graphics on it. I believe slide 3. So similar, but it's just over Google Earth. So to answer the question, we did look at August 2018 to look to see how many aircraft were flying on average between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And on the Surfer, there's just under 13 per day, and on the Diamond from the east, about 15. The reason that we're not interested in moving those traffic from the Surfer over to the east side is because that would impact different communities. The other is during the evenings when we have a gap at San Francisco, NCT likes to depart through the bay, and so that leaves those aircraft climbing out, and if you shift those aircraft to the east, they would be in conflict, so that's a safety issue.
Just that you can observe from the graphic there, the Diamond with the purple lines does show some vectoring that's already taking place. So there's some saturation already on the arrival route. So as Mindy mentioned, it would add a level of complexity when you've got arrivals and departures trying to share the same piece of airspace, and that doesn't work too well.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. Does any roundtable member have a question on this, or Jean, would you like to follow up?
Are there any questions first?
I do have one. The only thing I can't read on your graphic, I think, is down on the bottom left. Just, I believe it's daily numbers on Surfer and on Diamond, or am I not?
Yeah, that's kind of a bad color to use, but it's 14.5 per day. We averaged it for the month of August 2018.
Okay,
And that's between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
thank you.
So I guess the follow-up question, it's the same question asked differently, but because there's only 13 to 15 of these operations per day during that time period at night, actually, really are there conflicts with the arrivals and departures in time? We see that there are in space, but at the same time, would they be sharing that airspace? Did you look at the times that they're actually arriving and departing?
And so to answer your question, I mean, it's dynamic. You know, each time that they, send out the aircraft down the bay, to keep them off the land, to climb out, it's just dynamic. So, I mean, it does look like a small number, but, we would be shifting the noise.
Elizabeth?
Yes, Mark.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we're looking at what you call the spaghetti, all the flights for a month of August. Is that what we're looking at?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Are we looking at the entire month of August when we look at all those lines that are, I mean, that looks like more than 12.9 flights.
That's per day versus per month.
That's for the full month.
So are we
yes.
looking at per month is my question?
Yes, for the month, yes. So there
It
are
would
the
be
things that are
interesting to look at the per day, to look at 13 to 15 flights and really see if there's that much conflict. I mean, I understand that when you multiply it by 30, it's going to look like a big mess, and so we'll run away from the concept, the idea. But if we're talking about daily flights, that seems like a manageable number to be able to, have an impact.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are going to be times when they both show up together, and that's
Sure.
going to be hard to distinguish when you're looking at a 9-hour time difference. There may be occasions where if you look per hour, you can get a little bit more detail. But really, the main issue is really just shifting noise from one community to another, and that's I guess the main impediment to pursuing this more formally.
I think the request from the Roundtable really came about, in their view, as shifting the noise out to the bay at the lowest parts or closest to the airport, to where you're shifting the noise out over the bay rather than over communities. So I think there's a little bit of discontinuity there, and may want to take a look at, again, where you would be shifting noise versus, moving those operations out over the bay when they're at the lowest operating parameters. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the concept, not completely changing their trajectory, their whole landing procedure way out over other people's property. So I guess to the extent that we could keep it over the bay instead of over our residents in the middle of the night is something that we would really like to have some ideas presented back to us. How can that happen? If, and if we're only talking, 14 a night, it's still 14. People get awakened, and the nighttime is the worst. And I think that that's one of our biggest health concerns, that these planes are waking people up in the middle of the night over and over. I was talking with a Portola Valley resident the other day. She says, at 4 o'clock in the morning, this plane's coming over me. So, anyone else? Kathleen, did you want to say something?
I just had a couple questions.
Sure.
So maybe I think the concept was to find a path, and I don't think the Roundtable is wedded to any kind of concept,
Mm-hmm.
just any kind of path, but to find a path that might not be the circle, but might be able to be used by airplanes, wherever those 14 airplanes are coming from in Southern California or from 7 destinations, 7 starting points, and find a routing that would take them up to the diamond, and then there would be no conflict with anything else because they would just become part of the diamond arrival. And the conflict that I think I hear you guys describing is the use of the 050 down the bay, which is used for eastern flights. And those airplanes in the middle of the night could use the night departure, right? That's there for.
I'm sorry, can we get her on a mic, because anybody on the live stream is not going to pick her up.
Only one mic, the only mic, roving mic is that one.
So I think the concept was that if we took the Southern California type aircraft and put them on a different routing, whatever that might be, it might be a routing that would go, there's a Los Angeles, Oakland routing that takes it east of the bay all the way up. I've forgotten the name of it now. It has my knee and my hip and my, It's been a while, okay. But anyway, there's a routing that goes from LA to Oakland that does stay east of the bay all the way up. It does not connect with the Diamond, but. Right. So, but if we could look at something like that, taking that kind of a routing for those 14 planes, and yes, you'd have to talk to the airlines and get their buy-in, but I'm sure in the middle of the night they would understand. And so if we did that, then they just become part of the normal Diamond arrival. So that's what we're looking at. Does that make sense? I'm not saying if you agree, just does it make sense?
Yes, Kathleen, it makes sense. Thank you.
And of course, you know, we don't want to do something that's going to be unsafe or create, you know, shifting of noise terribly. But the goal is to get our residents some relief in the middle of the night. And to the extent that you could be a little creative about it, then that would be great. I'm not going to take comments from the public on this item. If you want to put your questions on a public speaker card at the end of the presentation with the FAA, we will ask them those questions through the chair. Okay? And Sue Degree.
Yes, well, a couple things. So some of us have been here longer than others, and have a long history of trying to figure this all out. So I remember one day it finally came to me on a July, a couple years ago, that the power was in the FAA, not really, but power was in the Congress to give a mandate to the FAA. And so tonight I had another little revolution, and I don't know why it came so late, is that what we're looking for is solutions. And no, we're not into shifting noise. What we're looking for are solutions to negative impacts of noise. And so they can't answer this tonight, but for those of us on the roundtable, I think if we start looking at 3 things at one time, so this is pervasive over the whole agenda because it hit me through the whole agenda, for a solution. So FAA, airport, airlines, there's 3 of you. And if you look at our mission statement, we're all in this together. So I think all of us should be working together to say, okay, we don't want to shift the noise, but what can airport and what can airlines do to get rid of the negative impact? So there's 14 flights. That sounds like a nothing. Everything always sounds like a nothing, but it isn't a nothing. And so I'm terming off, and I'm frustrated. I'll probably be over there.
Okay.
So the little bit I'm gaining as I sit here through many years, so that's my latest one, is if we focus on every aspect, our legislative, our work point, is there's a negative noise impact. FAA, airlines, airport, what can you do? Congress, what can you do? So that we can have a little bit more pointed needles, shall we say, so we can actually puncture this very painful thing. And I'm concerned that we look at the number of complaints and the number of, like, 14 sounds like a nothing, 60 complaints sounds like a nothing, 30 complaints sounds like even less nothing. We're deluding ourselves, and I just feel like a bundled piece of nerves because they just can't seem to grasp solutions. So for what it's worth, for the whole agenda today, I'm kind of looking at it that way.
So thank you very much, Sue. I understand a lot of us feel the same way, I'm sure. I'm going to just call for any other roundtable members' comments or questions on the FAA's response of question number 1. And if not, then we're going to move on to question number 2. Okay, Gene?
Okay, so question 2 and 3 are very closely related. I'm actually going to put them together, if you don't mind. Okay.
I think it's fine.
So questions 2 and 3 have to do with the use of the Dumbarton Procedure and or creating a new Dumbarton-like procedure. And this is to be used during south winds, which mostly occur during the winter. And not creating the opposite direction operations, because the FAA had responded to both of these saying that they can't support it because it would create opposite direction operations, and that's not what we were asking. So basically the resubmittal of this question was really to make sure that it was understood that we weren't talking opposite direction, but for, south winds or when we're in southeast flow at the airport.
Do we have any graphics, Bert, on this one? Okay, so what we're talking about here, Jean, can you kind of explain again?
Again, so these are southeast plan departures off of runway 10, which Bert, no.
Jump down to yours.
Okay. Okay, so you see the departures there going essentially east rather than the departures that go north or to the west. And so this is, again, the departures leaving the airport there, heading predominantly towards the east direction, then turning either northeast or south. And so not during opposite flow conditions when planes are also arriving that direction.
Can I ask for clarification before we move forward on what exactly, and I'm sorry, when we're talking about opposite direction on runway 10, it means it's going east right over my house, basically. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, so what we're not talking about is opposite direction where they're, what we were talking about earlier, the arrivals coming in on 2-8s. So if they're arriving 2-8 and departing 10,
Right.
that's what they call opposite direction conditions.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a graphic here, and there's a little bit of history behind it because when they went through the Metroplex project, they designed two procedures. One was the city and one was the fog. The city is still in effect. The Dumbarton was decommissioned, and the fog was canceled shortly thereafter. One of the reasons, actually the main reason that the fog was canceled, because actually, let me back up for a second. The reason that they came up with the two procedures is because they needed degrees divergence, because between that flow, they needed to have at least 15 degrees divergence to do simultaneous departures. But what happened was with those tailwinds, the aircraft weren't able to climb high enough to top the Oakland departures. So that became a safety issue, so that's why they canceled it. Which leads me to the Dumbarton procedure. The Dumbarton, as published, now obviously you all know that it's decommissioned, had a heading of 90 degrees. The city starts off at a 104, shortly thereafter goes to a 101 degree heading. We don't want to go too far right because we want to make sure that we're not going over land to impact the communities. So that's the reason why the Dumbarton, as it was, will not work, because they need that, that degrees divergence to be able to depart simultaneously. And they need that wiggle room to top the Oakland departures depending on how fast those aircraft are climbing. So they can either go behind them or in front of them depending on the situation, because again, it is dynamic. So that's the reason, the rationale behind the reason why we cannot do an overlay of the Dumbarton. So I wish I had a laser, so pardon me. Oh, you have one. Okay. What do I push? Red? Yeah, red. Okay, thanks. I don't usually use a laser. Okay, so the yellow line here is the old or the canceled fog. So this one would depart the left runway and go to a 70 heading. But the confliction point was here because they had a restriction of 4,000. When they have that wind on their tail, they're kind of pushed, and it was difficult for them to, make that restriction. So, oops. So the green line here, this is the city. So they start at a 104 degrees, and then they go to a 101, and they go straight down. So they're using the length of the bay here to climb down. And then you saw on your slides, what San Francisco is to get those aircraft out.
As far as the 15 degrees divergence that Mindy mentioned, I'm assuming that most of you don't know the reason for that, but it's an air traffic separation rule, which requires separation between simultaneous departures. And that's the minimum that we can have for aircraft departing simultaneously. Absent that, you're going to have a single stream coming out, and it will back up departures probably at both airports. So from an efficiency standpoint, it doesn't, it's not conducive for us to pursue that. The 15 degrees is something that's common at most U.S. airports, and has been in practice at San Francisco, both on the 10s and the ones that when the aircraft depart on the ones.
So the 15-degree of separation, I'm just trying to clarify for everyone, is you have the city, which is at 100, 101,
Yes.
whatever it was, and so your 90 is no longer have that separation.
Correct.
So you cannot do the 090 or the Dumbarton departure
Correct.
because of the existence of the city.
Correct. And then the other challenge, as Mindy mentioned, was anything further left, you have the crossing restriction reference the Oakland departures. And their climb out from Oakland is really impacted by the East Bay Hills out there, so they've got to get up to altitude, and so do the San Francisco departures. And that just makes it a little bit more challenging from a control standpoint and safety.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question.
Your mic's not on.
I have to do that, sorry. So the Dumbarton was the 090, right?
Yes.
You couldn't just tweak that a little bit to make it to give you the 15-degree separation from the green line?
So I understand what you're saying. It's just they want the flexibility to be able to turn, because again, when those winds are high, they really need the flexibility to turn. So if you're on a path there like the Dumbarton, a published procedure, they just want to be able to not put those aircraft in a safety situation.
So can we understand?
Yes, Mark, would you? Yes.
Elizabeth, I guess
Well,
we
go
spent a lot of
ahead.
time together.
We have.
So,
Yes.
so 085, I mean, it qualifies by math. It would get you your 15 degrees, but again, why would that not work?
I'm not saying it would not work. The ask was an overlay of the Dumbarton, so we were answering your question.
Well,
So I guess I'm asking.
But
we may have to
but-
recraft our questions.
But just to clarify, though, I mean, it is a wiggle room for the facility. So, I mean, if there was something published, that doesn't mean that they would actually use it necessarily, depending on the winds, the weather.
Sure.
Any other? Yes, Anne.
Am I on? Okay. No light. Refresh my memory. This is bad weather flights, daytime and nighttime, correct?
There was no specification on time of day with this. We just looked at overall.
Okay, so if these are bad weather flights and they're daytime, that's one thing. They're nighttime, what's the option then? Are they taking off on 19? Is that the only and preferred flight pattern?
Most times they're going to depart 10 unless the winds are so strong out of the southwest that they're going to depart 19.
I'm confused because I thought we were saying no 10 departures. So we are doing 10 departures,
Yes.
just not the Dumbarton pathway.
Right. The city is the departure route coming off the 10s.
This is for when the 10s are required due to winds, and you're in the southeast plan. I think that's right, Bert? Yeah.
Right.
Yes. The ask was to use the Dumbarton, which is the pink line, the magenta line. The green line is currently used right now, called the city. The ask was, why don't we go back to where we were with the Dumbarton? And it's an issue.
So are we experiencing noise on the city departure? And who is that East Palo Alto, Menlo, San Mateo, Foster City?
So I guess back to my question is, if we did ask the question in terms of daytime and nighttime, and we're at least trying to find some relief for people at night, given that there are fewer planes in theory, couldn't we use the Dumbarton at that time?
We could look at that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Any other members of the roundtable?
I actually have another clarifying question. So did you look at, I understand the separation, the 15 degrees, but did you look at replacing the city with the Dumbarton?
No.
I guess that wasn't our ask.
It
Kathleen?
wasn't clear in the ask, I would say.
Yeah. Kathleen, would you like to make a comment? Yes. You want to, Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
So just if you could help me understand the sequence of what happened. We used to have the Dumbarton, which was a single stream departure. They could not go out two at a time on that. Is that correct? I'm asking the question. I don't know. Okay. So right now, where are the old fog departures going? How are they being handled? So they're given a heading of what? 85 degrees or so? Okay. And so then the city is 104 once it gets out a little ways, or 101. And so we could have the city and, are you going to create a new fog? But they're basically have a new heading that they're working on, so you're able to do dual stream. So there'd be no reason not to do single stream at night. So that would be an easy fix. And could we do a single stream vector so it didn't have to be so close to the shoreline in Foster City? In other words, not do the city, which skirts Foster City, actually goes right over Foster City. So at nighttime, could we come up with either the 085 heading or split the difference, but get it off of the coast? Let's take a look at that. And then the other aspect of this, I think, that we didn't really talk about is the fact that aircraft flying the city go out maybe to the bridge or so, to the San Mateo Bridge, give or take, and then they're given on-course headings. So a lot of times they're turning right. They're given vectors to turn right and go down the peninsula at pretty low altitudes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the way down the peninsula. So that needs to be addressed, especially at night. There should be no, I don't think you'd want to be turning them off the course at night, would you?
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other clarifying questions? Any other members? Would you have some additional graphics, Mindy?
Yes, we reviewed the meeting before, the one
Yes.
before this one, and there was an ask to have some graphics with some warning areas on there with the departures, both the offshore and the stick. So that's what we brought you.
Thank you. So the red is the warning area.
Yes, it is. So and it's on all the slides, so it's not necessarily hot. You know, we don't fly through it with the offshore. That's when we use the stick. But there is a new transition that's being published on October 11th, which is the young transition, which I'm going to walk over here, and it's in this area. I forgot I had a laser, but it's in this area. So it's gonna kind of mimic actually, it's going to pull them off, so they're going to be a little bit more west there, and so that's also going to be, what was it, Long Beach and in Orange County traffic they're going to be following that as of October 11th. So that's going to be some relief on the peninsula there for some of the southbound traffic. So we just have a few more graphics there if you just want to forward. So that's got the stick, and then the offshore is the next one.
And is this offshore being flown now, the yellow?
Yes.
Okay. And there's just absolutely no way that we can ask for a little bit more territory from the government or whatever, the military, to just prevent us from going over our coastal cities at that point?
Yeah, I can't speak for them. I mean, we try to take, airspace from them a lot, but they have their mission, so that would be an ask to the DoD. I'm not quite sure on how many times it's active. Barry, do you know how many times a month? I mean, that might be something we could look into. I'm not quite sure, Bert, do you know how active that is?
I believe it's March 8 to 5.
Okay. But there is going to be some relief with that young transition on October 11th.
Can I ask a silly question on the graphic there? You have the majority of the flights are offshore, but there's a whole bunch of lines that are going right over the peninsula. Can you tell me what that is?
They're just on a different transition of the procedure, probably a different destination. I didn't dig that deep into that.
Very good, thank you.
Looks like they're on.
It's like Monterey,
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually a little further.
Right? Is it like Monterey?
Transition legs are named for the names down further. So you'll see KX, Susie, Katina, Livo, but it's actually the young transition, which is further down. Intel's mid on the right side. They're all named after the tech. So Intel and etc.
So to get any relief for our Pacifica and Half Moon Bay neighbors, it's way further north at that glob, and all the streams that are coming over the peninsula, the spine of our.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, what was your question again, please?
Well, I didn't finish, did I? I mean, it just seems like to try to get relief from Pacifica and Half Moon Bay, we have to do a better job of getting them off of that tip. And then, yeah.
I think one thing that comes to mind, and this may have been mentioned before, is just that in a perfect world, the aircraft are going to fly the routes as close as they're charted. In reality, you have different speeds of aircraft. Sometimes you have a private jet that's a little bit slower than 787, for example. So there's going to be separation requirements that have to be maintained. So the controllers will sometimes use vectors to get an aircraft established on a route earlier than what the chart calls for in order to maintain the required separation. That's because aircraft perform differently. Sometimes they're heavier, they don't climb as fast, there's wind variances. So there's a lot of different considerations that controllers use when they're sequencing these aircraft coming out. And that can explain some of the differences that you see in where the lines are actually depicted. But from the standpoint of the workforce, the controller workforce, I sense your frustration. I've heard similar, if not the same, concerns in San Diego and Los Angeles. So the controllers know the noise-sensitive areas and do their part to be good neighbors. It's not going to happen all the time, but to the extent possible, we take the commitment to go back and pass that information back to facility management so that they can brief the workforce. Here are some of the concerns that we're hearing from the communities. So at night, if there's an opportunity to, leave the aircraft on the route. Don't, provided that it's giving you the relief that you desire.
Anne?
Is it possible to see that information, but daytime versus nighttime?
Yes.
And how bad is it over land, especially in North County, during the night?
I'm not sure. We'd have to pull the data.
So because our North County cities don't complain as much as cities south of us, I'm interested on how you can identify which communities are noise communities. So, for example, Millbrae doesn't complain much. We kind of get a little bit of everything. But if I was in Pacifica, and there have been some complaints in the last 2 years, but nothing compared to Palo Alto, how would the controllers know to try to keep nighttime flights, especially, out over the Golden Gate and out over the water?
I think at some point the concerns are going to reach a certain level. It's going to be a congressional that we receive that says, hey, we're receiving noise complaints in this area, so that draws some attention. attending these meetings. We get to hear the community concerns. We pass that information back. You know, the one-offs, you're probably not going to get that information to the controllers on the control room floor, but the ones that raise to a certain level where they're brought up in roundtables through the mayor's office or other elected officials, those are the ones that really garner attention.
So here's my problem representing a community that recognizes itself as being an airport community and wanting to support the airport, and that many of our people have worked for airlines or the airport themselves, is we don't want to complain, but that doesn't mean that we're not up all night. Daytime, a little more flexibility. And I could go out there and get my community to file complaints, but I'd only be getting them upset when there's no change. So just because we don't have those numbers does not mean that we are not losing sleep and potentially, as we start looking at health effects, having our children not learning as well because of noisy airplanes or whatever else. So I'm concerned about the noise numbers alone being used to recognize which communities are most affected by noise. There have got to be other ways, and it's pretty clear how we can find those other communities that are affected by low noise at lower altitudes.
Thank you, Ann. All right, anything else?
I just wanted to make sure that I explained this properly too about the young transition, just that it will provide some relief on the stick when that is published, because these aircraft that are going down here to Katina, they will be going this way to the young transition. So I just want to make sure that point was out there. So it will be taking it off the land. So it'll be published on October 3rd or 11th.
That seems like, yes, just 1 second. Kathleen, did you want to, you feel that's really good? Yes. Okay. And we had someone over here. Was it? Oh, it was there.
So with regard to the offshore, those people in Pacifica, Sue, know full well that that prior to the implementation of the next-gen procedure, there were 2 southbound procedures off of runway 1s that existed. One was the overwhelmingly majority used was the port departure, which is basically the stick now, very similar. And the other was the offshore departure. And the offshore, can I have your little clicker? No, your little pointer. Okay. So with that one, this is, you don't have anything closer, do you? Closer in? On the, no, that's better. So the port, the port does something like coming like this. I mean, I'm not a good clicker person. And the offshore, which was used for the coastal cities, Long Beach, Santa Ana, Santa Barbara, used the offshore, which came out to a similar point in the bay and started to turn about the same way. But instead of coming down like this, the offshore kind of went over like this, kind of like the short way across the peninsula. And because it was a conventional, not an RNAV departure, it had had 1 or maybe 2 sections of headings within the departure, so that it had natural dispersion that allowed it to be kind of spread the wealth in that way. And there's ways to make RNAV do that, but the FAA doesn't generally like to do those designs, I understand. Huh? Yes, it is. No, yeah. I know it's still published, but we'd like to see the offshore turned into an RNAV for use for those coastal cities rather than the young, and here's why. Because as the offshore, like the young transition off of the, off of the stick now is just the regular stick, and then it continues down, right? There's no difference. So you're still having this thing it's not the this and then across with the dispersed path that used to be. So when NextGen came along, somebody decided that it could combine the offshore and the port into the stick, which meant that aircraft that didn't ever come over Pacifica, they used to come over this way, a percentage of them, were now increased substantially coming over Pacifica. So that's the problem that NextGen created for that particular area. And the ask
in restoring the offshore departure or creating it as an RNAV or whatever, need not replicate the exact thing, but the concept is to replicate something that is the old offshore path, more or less, and then just stays off the coast and connects maybe down at Foyle, and then down to Young. And that would provide the kind of restoration of the status quo ante for Pacifica, which did not have some percentage of all those coastal city flights flying over their cities. So that's the explanation of what I think they were looking for the establishment of something similar to an offshore.
Provide relief for Pacific.
Well, provide relief to restore it the way it used to be.
Seems like a no-brainer.
For those percentage of flights that used to use that routing. And those, nobody really has ever told me a number, maybe 10 or 15% of the flights go to coastal destinations versus LA. I don't really know a number. But it would be, the concept would be restoring it to the status it had before the next gen combined those two departures, which had two very different pathways over the North Peninsula. Did I get that, Sue?
Yeah. And then maybe, yeah. So, Terry O'Connell, Brisbane.
Thank you. Brisbane is located just north and west of the airport. And since RNAV, we have had a lot more flights over. They're making their big turn. They're coming just north of Brisbane, and the majority and turning left. When they do that, they're turning shorter and shorter and coming closer over the bowl of Brisbane and increasing the noise tremendously. And because they've got a smaller railroad through there, they've been concentrating that noise. We're also finding that they're not gaining the same altitude before they make that turn and they're diverged over Brisbane. So I'm wondering why the heights have gone down. So they're not gaining the same altitude before they make their left-hand turn to circle back down and go south. And it's just putting a lot of pressure on Brisbane, and then it's heading out over to the coast, and they're getting the same noise issues from those same flights. And when I watch the flight trackers, I see them basically come over Brisbane and make a big circle to head east, to heading towards Dallas and Houston and everywhere east of us. So they're making a big horseshoe and coming through, and there's got to be a better way to get them higher quicker with more power and forcing them to get higher before they make that left-hand turn. So.
Thank you, Terry. Just
I don't know how the young
another reminder
transmission's
for the
gonna help
public, we are not asking, having public comments right now for the FAA from the public. If you have questions that you want to ask, there are speaker cards and you can write them down. And then after the presentation, I will ask those questions for you. And Mark, did you want to say something? You looked like you were about to. Okay. Any other roundtable member have a comment about this? Mindy and Barry, thank you. I hope you understand what our objectives are, and maybe we're not crafting the questions exactly the right way to get the right answer. But in our minds, there are some simple fixes that if you guys could take some of these ideas and concepts back and help us with maybe coming up with something that would provide some relief. Maybe the next meeting we can talk more about that. I know, but we will also work, on our agenda we have a discussion about how we're going to craft our questions for the next round, okay? With that being said, I thank you all very, very much for coming, and I know that you have to leave, and I just want to announce that they are going to leave. Barry has to catch a flight, and I think that they're going to be escorted out by Kathleen Wentworth. Okay? Thank you again. Thank you. And I have some speaker comments cards. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know Peggy McLaughlin wanted to speak on agenda item number 8. And Riva Fabricant, Mary Jo Fremont, Darlene, she's written her question for me. So I will read Darlene's question. Darlene Yapley from Palo Alto. The FAA's response to question number 1 is not done because shifting noise. Given Kathleen's proposal, something to Oakland, LA to Oakland, going east of the bay and not connecting to Diamond, is this a possibility? I think that this would be something that we should maybe discuss and put into our next questions. So thank you, Darlene. So are you Riva?
No, Peggy? No, that's me.
Peggy?
Yeah. So
Yes.
Am I not supposed to come up?
Are you on item number 8?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you have 2 minutes.
I just wanted to briefly echo or duplicate your comments, Elizabeth, because honestly, I'm here, frankly, on another topic, but it's appalling to me that we perhaps didn't craft our questions exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
For heaven's sakes, I mean, is this how the system works, that we only can ask a question in a certain fashion?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer to that is no, there's no discussion about, yes, well, how about 85 degrees? And, you know, I'm frustrated that the FAA had to scoot out before we could have a full discussion, and I just wanted to make that point, and perhaps any of you on the roundtable can further elucidate all of us who are mere public citizens and would like to understand how this works and how we can affect change when the FAA can drop in and respond to perhaps not exactly perfectly crafted questions. Thank you.
The next speaker, Riva Fabricant, out of Oakland. These are public comments. We're not in a discussion at this point.
I can hand it to the chair.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm from the city of Oakland, probably the only person here from the East Bay, I think. And I was hoping to address this to the FAA. My thoughts were very similar to Peggy's, in that the FAA are the experts in flight and in aviation, and they design these paths, and how can they possibly expect the community, the public, the impacted citizens to come up with the right questions or the right proposed flight paths that will work for the FAA? I think it's totally absurd that they expect that, and would love to see somehow them sitting down at a table with representatives of the Roundtable and also the Oakland Noise Forum, so they can plan together for this very complicated space, rather than give you guys separate answers and us separate answers and then say, but your proposal wasn't detailed enough. You didn't ask the question correctly. So anyway, my thought, thank you. And one more thing is, please, we suffer enough in Oakland with departures from SFO. Please don't put any more over us or think about it. It's really difficult.
Thank you. Mary Jo Fremont, Palo Alto.
So we are coming here every 2 months. I've been coming to I don't know how many meetings now. It's on my calendar. The word noise is mentioned probably 50, 100 times in every meeting. We just had the most interesting statement from the FAA tonight about this change will shift noise to another community. We have no data on noise. The FAA can get away by saying it shifts noise. And for a technical organization who has been supposedly listening to all these communities. The select committees ended in November 2016. That was 2 years ago. We have had no relief. I just can't understand how we can accept as a community at large that a technical community can say unilaterally it shifts noise. So I will put some questions for the FAA, but I will say that you cannot just make a claim. The specific example is there are altitudes at 8,000 feet versus altitude at 4,000 feet. They can design procedures that would reduce the speed, that would not have any speed break. They can do things with the airlines. They are completely stalling us, hoping that maybe we will we'll go away and we'll know, I don't know, we'll die. But so I would really encourage everyone, especially the Roundtable, to request that you cannot just say shifting noise with no data. That's really not right, for a technical organization especially.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Let's see, I have a couple of other speaker cards, 3 of them. Steve Farlow lives in San Francisco, Little Hollywood.
Right at the southern border.
Okay.
It's right north.
So would you like to go up and, since I'm allowing this, state your question or your comment? You've got 2 minutes. Okay.
Oh, is it by Geneva? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
I live in a Little Hollywood neighbor in San Francisco. It's right over the Brisbane line. There's a constant stream of aircraft. If you can hear the fan, I fly for American Airlines. I'm a A320 pilot. I'm based out of LAX. If you can hear the fan, it's way too low. And that's all we hear. It's coming at you like a freight train. And this is a constant stream of traffic. My question is, why was Stick located where it was located? We've got an uninhabited part of the city known as Hunters Point. There's an old abandoned shipyard out there. You can, and if you look at all of the departures, the Stick departure is the place where the aircraft make landfall is the closest of any departure off of San Francisco, period. They go up the Stick, which is located out off of Candlestick Point. They make a left turn. It comes right over the neighborhood. They could be further out in the bay, making the turn over Hunters Point. By the time they come over the inhabited parts of the city, they've got a lot more altitude. Also, there's a thing called an NADP-1 departure. It's standard procedure in international departures. It's you take off power to 1,500 feet above the ground, throttle back to climb power, and you don't accelerate until 3,000 feet. This is not a part of the Stick procedure. I've seen it. You can look it up yourself. There's nothing about an NADP-1 departure. None of this stuff was put in there. My question is, who located Stick? What is the name of the person who located the Stick intersection? Who decided to put it there? Now, we all know that what this is, it's all about is money and keeping everything as efficient as possible. If you got to pay some money to keep people happy, you got to pay some money to keep people happy. And like I said, if you can hear the fan, you're way too low, way too low. And you have to ask yourself, what is the altitude where you're just hearing the whoosh of the airplane rather than the fan?
Thank you. Right on time. There you go. So I have a comment from Louis Marginala. Yes, we'll keep that as a record. Louis Maraviglia, Hillsborough resident. Hello, hello. His question is, how did the airplanes depart last weekend when runway 1 was closed for the repairs from midnight to 6 a.m.?
Over Brisbane.
So that was, what procedure did they use? Mm-hmm. It was wonderful. So, Ivar, do you want to make a comment?
I think we were in a straight 2.8 for that. Is that, Doug, is that correct? Straight 2.8 for the...
Let's see, my reports.
Sorry. Okay. you want to can we comment?
Oh, no.
I'm not familiar with, I thought it was a straight 2-8. When the runway was closed, what was our departure pattern? Do you know our operation? Oh, yeah, you were off last week. Bert, do you know?
All right, Bert. Bert knows everything, you know? He does. Bert knows everything.
The answer to the question on what procedures are being used, basically standard procedures. We have 2 pairs of intersecting runways. One of each was closed, so we were still doing the same procedures off the other runways. Another one, I just received a text from Glenn Morse of United, said they have gone to all NADP-1 departure procedures for their operations, so just to let you know that. And that's noise abatement departure procedure, NADP.
So that's good news?
That's what the pilot, Steve Farlow, was mentioning.
Yes.
Climb to 1,500 feet, nose over a bit, and then reduce power to 3,000, then continue climb.
So this is our chief pilot of United saying?
Not chief pilot, but
Well.
he's in the management end, yes.
Well, whatever.
Was that of a certain date that he was implementing that?
He just told me they're doing it right now, so. They were using the same procedures. It was just, there were a lot less aircraft. There were a lot of cancellations. The airlines canceled a lot of flights. So one of the days, I think I saw 918 operations versus the 1,400 that we typically see.
Bert, can you explain what the NAD, can you explain the relevance of that, and is that now, was that in place for the construction, or is that a procedure they're flying now because of?
NADP is a ask that we have definitely on the 2.8s. It's for close-in noise abatement departure procedures. And so communities close into the airport, it will benefit them. NADP 2 is for distant communities. So obviously we have communities around the airport, we're going to ask for NADP 1. Glenn just mentioned that United is doing that procedure right now for their operations here at SFO.
They've implemented NADP 1 for their operations at SFO for all departures that United flies. Is that what we're under?
Pretty generic. He said you can announce that, and I was just reading that before I got called up, so yes.
So if you could maybe give a brief description on what does that mean technically as in terms of altitudes and flight track? Who does it help?
It should help everybody. In particular, as Glenn mentioned here, we have gone to all NADP 1, all aircraft, all runways. You can announce that. So what they're doing is climb to 1,500 feet, nose over, reduce power, go to 3,000 feet, and then continue climb. So they're giving a bit of a respite, is the best way to put it, through the climb.
On stick departures or on which?
He says all.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You got another one coming in.
I'm sorry, Bert.
Please.
So what you're saying is the first 1,500 feet, they're using a lot of power, it's very noisy. Then they slow down the ascent, so that is a little quieter, and then
Correct.
that's why it's going to
So what we're trying to do is climb as much as possible over the airport, where they're generating as much power as they can, and then get to 1,500 feet, nose over, reduce the power a bit as they go over the communities, get to 3,000 feet, and then resume. Glenn also just shot me another text, said about a month ago is when they started this.
Okay, so this late breaking news via Twitter accounts and everything, but text. So Bert, Director Satar mentioned that maybe we will return with next meeting with a more complete report and analysis of what this really means for our communities. Yeah. Okay, thank you, thank you. So I have Rick Grogan, Burlingame, says he's regarding Mark Adiago's comment regarding the 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. reduction of flights per day. I concur with his position, and I would like to see the number of flights by time, you know, the analysis of, you know, the flights by time, not just that. So maybe we can work on getting another graphic and analysis on that. Mary Jo Fremont from Palo Alto has 3 questions for the FAA, and maybe we can talk about those for something next time. How does the FAA assert that a requested change will shift noise over new communities? Given that we have been waiting for the BSR overlay, could the FAA consider designing a new procedure that will take full advantage of the upcoming GBAS landing system? And has the FAA assigned a technical lead for the NorCal Metroplex as they did in Boston? So those are kind of open-ended questions. If there are no other, I've seen Peter Grace. Last one. I'll let you make a comment. 2 minutes, Peter. And yeah, you're being blocked out there. And then, do you want to do yours?
I'd just like to. My name is Peter Grace. I live in Brisbane, which is on the flight path for Styx. As you know, the planes take off runway 1, go over the bay, turn left, and go over the peninsula. For me, it's absolutely horrifying about the NADP. They climb to 1,500 feet over the bay. The nose goes over. They climb to 3,000 feet, and they increase the power. The height of the planes over Brisbane is 3,000 feet, so we're damaged. The NADP-1 should be the opposite. It should go 2,000 or 3,000 feet up, noise over, and climb to a much higher height before turning over the peninsula. When you have the bay to disperse noise, NADP-1 does not seem to me that it actually works. It's not of benefit to the communities underneath. You need to use the bay to gain the altitude, and not the other ones. Could somebody comment about whether NADP-1 is actually
Peter,
of benefit to the community?
Peter, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and I'm going to let you take your seat. Okay. So I have a speaker card, but there's no name on it. The gentleman that just came. Jeff. Okay. So Jeff is asking, can the Roundtable send SFO a letter to other airlines and let them know that United is being a good neighbor? Okay. We're going to get to the bottom of that. And he has a follow-up question for the FAA. Thank you very much for coming. Ask follow-up question in communication. FAA regarding NextGen tried very hard to point procedure design criteria must be modified to consider not just safety and efficiency of airspace uses, but also community impact. That's why they strongly support modification of procedures of Surfer, Dumbarton, Candle, Stick, and Bodega to USA Bay. Believe NorCal Metroplex offers unique opportunities, and asking what can we do to move forward with revision. I think that's exactly what we've asked them tonight. So I have a speaker card from Sean Cook, United Airlines, who says he can speak with about the NAPD DP1 departures, if we would like him to do that now, or do we want to
Let's give him,
give him, okay, come on up, Sean.
So I'll speak kind of general terms of the NAPD1. What it does gain for you is altitude. The takeoff power the jets use is depending on the weight of the jet. So it can be a normal takeoff, or it can use more power if needed. But it wouldn't change whether it's an NAPD1 or NAPD2, which is the 800-foot takeoff profile. The aircraft are going to gain a higher altitude quicker doing the NAPD1. They get away from the ground quicker, the throttles come back at 1,500 feet, and then they accelerate at 3,000 feet. So the big gain for everyone is just we get away from the ground quicker. We have been doing it for quite a while for all of our departures off of SFO. Are there any specific questions on it?
Anne?
So I had thought that one of the ways to reduce some of the backblast noise for Millbrae, Burlingame, Hillsborough is that kind of doing a faster takeoff, a steeper takeoff. But I can tell you the last couple of months seems to be so much noisier than times past. And I don't know if that's related to United changing their, or it's the atmospheric conditions. We just don't have enough data to know about that. But if you did do that faster elevation, what does it do on ground-based noise or backblast, low-frequency noise?
I don't have an answer for that. That's getting a little too technical on the noise aspect for my knowledge to speak to. But as far as I can speak to what the aircraft do, what the pilots do on those NEPD1 departures.
So,
It's a noise abatement procedure. That's what it was designed for originally.
Okay, thank you. I think that this needs more information for us, and Director Sattar has indicated that he will do that and bring back a more full report next time. Thank you so much, Sean. I do have Council member and Roundtable member Al Royce has a short letter to read from Hillsborough resident Aaron Zakran.
Zorns. Thank you, Madam Chairman. A letter from Aaron Zorns, who's a resident of Hillsborough, had to leave to pick his daughter up from church, and asked I enter it into the record, and I will send it to you. But it refers to the comment made earlier with respect to the maintenance that was done over the weekend. And he wanted to note again is that for the first time in 2 years, he was able to sleep through the night. There was no noise. And he asked the same question that was asked earlier, what was the difference? And is there any way to make that permanent? And I think we ought to follow up on that. I heard the answer that was given, number one, number of cancellations. I'd be interested in the data on that, how much was canceled, and is there any way to sort of reconfigure that? And secondly, I think I heard that there was just a different runway that was used. I might be mistaken on that second comment, but he wanted that question asked, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to close this item and go back to our regular agenda. We have some housekeeping items to take care of. We're going to go back to our consent agenda item, which are items number 4 and 5. It's the review of the Roundtable meeting action minutes for June 6th and August 1st, and then the airport director's reports for June, July, and August, and the Fly Quiet report Q2 for 2018. So are there any questions, or any member of the Roundtable want to pull either item for discussion? If not, may I entertain a motion? Second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. So we'll go on to our regular agenda, which is item number 6, and I believe number 7. You're going to do both of those, Director Sotaro?
Yes.
SFO updates and the GBAS. Here we go.
Thanks. Thank you. Couple updates. Well, first, let me say thanks to Mindy and Barry for being here. We appreciate that. This has been a topic at the Noise Forum meetings that I attend with other airport directors with the FAA, and we appreciate the FAA's responsiveness to the need to have the participation of the FAA in these meetings. So we're glad to have you here. I do appreciate the frustration that the public having to craft the perfect question is not the position we should all be in. So we'll have further conversations with the FAA folks regarding that. GBAS status, we are continuing in the development of procedures. We did present update to the technical working group last month. Last night there was a presentation to the community in Palo Alto. We are asking the airlines to fly these procedures in their flight simulators so we can validate noise effect. And I stand firm on our commitment that we will not implement a procedure that has a negative effect on a community. We are looking for positive effects in these procedures and prioritizing those procedures which have the most opportunity for community benefit. And so we stand by that continued commitment. And we're going to continue to work through these and share the data and make sure that there's involvement in every step, so we can build that trust and confidence that we're doing things to try to solve these issues. So we'll continue work on GBAS. Second chance noise insulation program, notwithstanding Ms. Gotelli's comments, I'm not sure what trouble you ran into on our website. Thanks for your comments, though, and I would ask that if you would get with Bert afterwards. This is intended to be as seamless as possible. And we are getting applications. I'll give just a quick report. There's two programs out there. There's the continued FAA program on noise insulation, and then there's the airports program. The airports program is $1 million a year that we're committing. We've received, related to the FAA program, we've received 127 applications for replacement, and we've determined about 83 of those are within the noise exposure map. So those are ones we proceed with to determine additional eligibility for the FAA program. Related to the airport's Second Chance Initiative program, we've received 96 applications, 20 of which are within the noise exposure map. So we continue now to proceed with the first round of site surveys with those that we determine currently look to be eligible. Again, you know, this is our pilot, our first year doing this, and we certainly welcome feedback. And really, it's a way of gauging what the population is out there that desires and would benefit from this. And so it's still a live program, and I do encourage feedback. So again, Ms. Gotelli, we would appreciate your feedback. Community outreach, we participated in a town hall meeting last week in San Francisco. District 11 Supervisor Safai, who sits on this community roundtable, conducted a town hall, and we talked we discussed the framework of the noise problems that occur in the south part of San Francisco, very similar to the noise problems that occur in Brisbane. As a result of NextGen. And so we developed that framework, and then we talked about the night hush departures out to Gobs and that opportunity, and the need to continue to push that with the FAA, with our airline partners. And there was a gentleman who commented on the airlines, and you know, that is a work in progress with the airlines. United is, I think, is a good partner with us in moving things forward. They've committed on the vortex generators retrofit. They are also committed to working with us on this hush night or other noise benefit opportunities. And so United is an important player for us in this, as well as the other big airlines at SFO. And so we're going to continue we're going to outreach to the other airlines and try to get them as part of this allegiance that we need to move things forward. Let's see. And then there are another town hall, Congresswoman Spears Town Hall on the 23rd. I will be attending, and Kathleen, I think there's been great interest in that, and we will hold that one. It is the 23rd, night of the 23rd in San Mateo. Is that right? Skyline. Sorry, Skyline College. Okay. Portable noise monitoring, just an update on our reporting. In today's documents, you will see the reports for Brisbane, Portola Valley, and Woodside, the quarterly reports. So they are there for reference. Okay.
Thank you so much. I just want to, hot off the press from your meeting last night is an article in the Almanac News. I don't know if any of you read the Almanac News about SFO to add navigation system to reduce some plane noise over peninsula. So the GBAS word is getting out. So little by little, people will become more aware of it. And I do have a speaker slip on item number 6. Liz Lopez, you have 2 minutes?
With the chair?
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Yes. You want to wait for that? Okay, good. All right.
Well, this is coming up. Can you tell us what GBAS is?
Oh, sure. Ground-based augmentation system. No.
It's a GPS navigation system versus ground-based radar. It's satellite GPS. So there's a much more defined accuracy, level of accuracy.
We've had a couple of very in detail presentations on it, and even at our working group, and every time it gets more refined. It's really a good thing. So Liz, sorry.
Yes, I wanted an update on the $2.4 billion expansion at SFO. Like, when will that be finished? How many flights will be added to the air? What ways will they be using most often?
Curbside and traffic and those things. And so this is about terminal space having the capacity. So for the future, the airport's going to grow at the rate that we have a forecast rate of 2 to 3% domestic and 5% international. That doesn't translate to operational growth, because what we've experienced is over the past 5 years, we've seen 27% passenger growth and only 9% operational growth, because we do have some levers that help us get the airlines to fly larger aircraft, which they've done. Average seat size has gone up from 126 seats per operation to over 150 seats per operation. Load factors have gone up to over 85% load factors, and then the schedule has filled out during the day more. Instead of the dramatic peak from at 8 a.m., 7 to 9 a.m. that we used to have back in the 90s when there were a lot of delays, now it's basically 7 through the early afternoon and then bleeding into the nighttime, as you're all aware. So that's kind of the lay of the land with development and the growth that we're experiencing.
Okay, Mark.
Director Satter, I wanted to congratulate you on the success of your Second Chance program, because I really think that that is your baby that you carried to your Airports Commission, and you hit that magic number of 20, which I guess pretty much exhausts that first allocation of $1 million.
I think we have room for 10 more, thereabouts, 10 to 12 more.
10 more. So there is an opportunity for the woman who maybe put this in your ear so many meetings ago.
Yes, Ms. Gotelli. Glad to call her out for that.
And then can you share with us what you anticipate your Airport Commission might do into the future? You alluded to the fact that there might be more money in other budget years, but is it something that might multiply from the $1 million?
We're looking at what is that response from the community, and then deciding what's the appropriate budget to set. The $1 million was just our first estimate of what we could get done based on the resources we have. The FAA has also expressed a willingness to participate in our program, and so we'll be looking in future years to request monies from the FAA. So I believe it's not a one-year deal. It's going to be a continuing program for the foreseeable future until and if we underspend $1 million, we're just going to roll into the next year. We're not going to call it a savings and pocket the money. So we plan on continuing the program.
So again, I want to thank you, because this is a sea change in the thinking of the director of the airport. For so many years it was one shot and you're done, and almost 30 years goes by, and there's a lot of deterioration. So thank you on behalf of the first 20 participants.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Anne.
Also, thank you for the insulation program. Our residents here had two problems. One, they had problems getting the report filed. I think that's been fixed since then. But also, it turns out with the change in the 65 decibel maps, there are only 3 homes in Millbrae that qualify. Which was surprising, because it used to be homes up behind us here would qualify in that program. So my question would be, and if we are successful in changing where we put the noise monitors, will that open up perhaps some of those, all I can think of is isotherms, the 65 decibel maps, if we change from, and I know Brisbane will help me here, with the way we're currently measuring one type of noise, but there's another way of measuring a different type of noise, that might open up the number of households that would qualify.
Under federal law, we're prohibited from expending monies outside of the 65 dB as it's currently defined. However, there is a noise annoyance study that the FAA has conducted, and that may have findings that force the FAA to rethink how noise is characterized. I don't know about. We've been hearing about a release date, but it keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. I think that's an important document that needs to come out and then be dealt with, whatever it says.
And we're tracking that report, looking at staff?
Yes, it'll be known once it's out, this body will know of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other roundtable member like to make a, Sue?
I don't expect an answer, but and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I don't understand how the airport doesn't have any control about the number of planes that keep coming in, but you have to control congestion. I don't know how you can possibly keep up with that. I don't quite understand all that.
It's not easy, as you probably experienced. The other thing is we constrain our growth. We don't. Let me say that we don't overbuild. We don't open up an opportunity to get flooded and exacerbate the issue. So we don't overbuild gates or terminals. We build when we see the need gets to that point where it causes so many other contributing congestion issues and quality of life issues. And so it's a difficult thing because we don't have control over the planes flying in and out. And so that's a bit of a disconnect in how the whole system works. So it's something we're thinking about how to work through a pilot program with the FAA where there would be that matching of airspace capacity with terminal capacity and other constraints at airports. So we are putting effort into that type of framework so we can talk to our electeds and the FAA around that.
Okay. Terry? Yes.
Thank you. One quick comment I'd like to make is that we did make a request, Brisbane did, one of our citizens, about the flight tracking maps availability, and I wanted to thank the airport for looking into, right now we have only a 7-day tracking ability to go back and look at flights, and I talked with Bert today, and he said that they are looking into getting us like a 6-month, returning back to at least the 4-month that we had prior to look at history, and probably to a 6-month extension for that data, which I wanted to appreciate that the airport looked at that so quickly.
Thanks. Anne?
Just a very quick question, Ivar's relative, and I know it's somewhat theoretical, but it's one that is posed frequently in our community, particularly as the nighttime hours. Noise has increased pretty dramatically over the last few years with the increased number of flights that are obviously occurring in those hours. And when you mentioned, and I was going to ask it, and it was asked by one of my colleagues, was the amount of growth that you're projecting with 2 to 3% domestically, 5% international, my mind immediately goes to where will those flights go? And I know that you've talked about the capacity, daytime capacity being nearly maxed out relative to the airport's ability to handle that traffic. So it leads you to believe that those flights have only one place to go. And I have been asked by some of our constituents to project forward at some level to see what those might be. And it's kind of a terrifying number if I start to apply those percentage increases on an annual basis and slot them into either late evening or early morning hours. And this obviously affects both departure and arrival cities in that sense. So areas of the peninsula. So I just wondered how you think about that issue as you're dealing with all of the noise issues that clearly are coming through this group.
Yeah, you know, and the first thing is we've suspended we had an incentive program for new flights and new routes. We would waive landing fees for 2 years, and we've suspended that program for the hours of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., particularly for that reason, is we don't want to encourage that type of activity because of community issues around that, quality of life issues. You know, as far as domestic growth, they all want to come in at the same, well, international and domestic, they all want to fly at the same time. And so the efficiency of the operation has increased pretty dramatically in terms of United used to turn just under 7 turns a gate. is a metric of efficient use of our gates. Now they're turning over 9 turns a gate, and so we are making more efficient use of those gates because it's about connectivity and it's about feeder aircraft. So flying, adding a lot of flights at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. doesn't serve the overall benefit. And I think it's important that the airlines become part of the community awareness issue and participating, because they shouldn't propose flights like that because of community concerns. And so I think that is an opportunity for us to bring them in as partners to help solve community issues and help them get alignment in certain values we should share in how we grow at SFO.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Let's see. So that brings us to item number 9 on our agenda. And as you could tell, developing questions for the FAA is a big job. It's critical in what we do with the relationship with the FAA, because the rules have changed, and this agenda item has 3 components to it. But I want to give just a brief little history that it used to be, I mean, for those of us who remember being on the roundtable, when the FAA came, or NorCal TRACON representatives, they came, we had a lot of almost informal give and take with them, and they would answer our questions, kind of in a timely manner. We had that. But actually, it was very refreshing, Mindy, I have to tell you, because we did fire off some questions that were not on the list that you fielded off the cuff. So that gives me a little bit more heart. But before the next gen and OWAMPM procedures, we did have more FAA responses to our questions on a timely basis, and we didn't have to structure or put too much pre-thought in doing it. But that has changed, and because the FAA has changed, and the FAA is trying to create some structure in how they deal with all of the roundtables, all of the various elected officials, all the members of the public who are railing at them, in high emotional anger about their lives being destroyed because of the increased flights over their houses, because of the next gen. So they've requested, and every time I talk to Barry and the other FAA members on the phone with all of our staff, they say, we are committed to developing a good relationship with the San Francisco Airport Roundtable. We want to find solutions with you. But they've asked us to formulate our questions at least 30 days in advance of them coming to our meeting so that they can review them and assign the appropriate technician to answer these questions, okay? But as you can see, the first round we had two months ago, we asked some very open-ended questions, and they said, well, you weren't specific enough, and now we can't, And then we tried to get kind of really specific, and they said, well, you're too specific because, you didn't ask it. But we want to hear, I want to hear from you all, from your constituents. You are your constituents' voice here on the roundtable. And one of the things here in this agenda item is item number A, which is like priority items, the issues. I think if every member of this roundtable representing their individual city and their individual jurisdiction and constituents would submit to the, staff and executive team 3 to 5 hot topics, what is bothering you the most, that would give us something to then build off of. And because we can't kind of strategize right now with all of these members specific questions, because we take it back to the consultants and you say, okay, folding back in from the initiative, that's been our gold standard, you know, that everybody worked on for 2 years, and our responses, and that we asked the FAA and they responded, no, you can't do that because, and we thought, well, maybe they've misunderstood, and we tried to recraft. But let's kind of open it up, and I'm asking for your input on that idea also. Yes, Ron. Yes. No, but let's just look at item A, the priority issues, and I just really want to hear from our roundtable representatives here.
I don't have a priority issue, but if this was an example of what the FAA is going to, how they're going to operate in the future, this is incredibly frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that there ought to be, they ought to send representatives and let people ask the question, because one question generates another question. Somebody thinks of something because of something somebody else said, and they want an answer to it. I would say they should come and listen to all the questions, write them all down. They don't have to answer them that night, but agree to come back at the next meeting. It can't be that hard. This was incredibly frustrating. You didn't ask the question in the same way. You didn't put the comma where you should have. I don't know, it's an insult to us, and I think it's an insult to the audience. Just have somebody come out and take the questions. If they can answer them, fine. If they can't, say, we'll get back to you, and then come back the next month. I mean, I've only been on this panel for less than a year, but I certainly don't want to see that happen again.
Understand. Mark.
So Elizabeth, it is frustrating, and your explanation, I think, really filled in the gaps there, because the FAA is not what it was as far as their ability to just chat with us about situations, and we understand that. And at the same time, they're almost treating the chair in this body as if we're prosecutors, and they're going to be so very cautious with any answer. Just not a healthy situation we find ourselves in. But I'm wondering, I like the democratic idea of everybody having 3 to 5 questions, although there are 20 of us. And I would like to bear down on issues like what Pacifica finds itself in, because I didn't find those answers all that satisfying tonight on why so much of the traffic goes down over the land along the coast, when if they just flew a little bit more to the east and then turned, they'd be over water. And Jean, you have to help us on this. I think we need a little more guidance from our consultant in helping us craft the right question that doesn't allow the wiggle room that the FAA has used.
I think the consultant's having as difficult of a time not crafting exactly the right question. Any other members on this end? Sue, yes.
I just want to repeat again that they need to understand that our whole mission is noise, and that we want solutions. So yes, this is terribly frustrating. So they give, well, we can't give you a solution because you didn't ask the right question.
Okay.
That's got to stop.
Yeah. Anyone else? Diane? Supervisor Pine?
No.
Terry?
So perhaps if there's a topic that we want to ask them and it's XYZ, so we say, can you discuss XYZ, or is there a modification to XYZ that the FAA would consider to help with the problem of XYZ? So you've got to ask it sort of in a 3-pronged roundabout way of, this is our issue as we see it, and is this a solution? And if that's not the solution, is there a modification to that solution that would be considered by the FAA? And I think if we word it that way, then they have less of a circular way to get out of answering the question.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I know how everybody's very frustrated, but I just have to say that our interaction tonight with the FAA was far superior than the previous one.
Yes.
Where, I was extremely frustrated the last time. In this situation, we were actually allowed to ask a few questions that were kind of outside of the original questions.
Right.
They did bring up questions that we had asked last time and give us some clarification. So I just want to give it to them. They really, it was a very different tone than the last time. It's an improvement, and I appreciate it, and I hope we continue to move in the right direction.
Like I said, we're kind of, learning as we go here. This was only our second round, and, we're wanting to get ahead of the curve. And I modify my request. I don't want you guys to give me 3 to 5 questions to answer, topics, issues, areas that are really, hurting. And we're getting very late, but that's something to think about. And so I think what we're going to do is send out another little email to everybody to kind of ping you, and you can respond that way, okay? The other topic then is how do we prioritize? And so I think that if everyone responds and tells us what your hot issues are, I mean, there's going to be a lot of overlap, and then we can kind of prioritize by figuring out, what is the top ones. And item number B in here, the protocol on responses and to inquiries. Well, as you know, there are many residents who are very distressed and they want answers. James gets calls, he gets emails all the time from residents, your constituents, asking for information, for answers, and James does his best, but he doesn't have time to answer and provide all that. Historically, the way the Roundtable has worked is that your constituents, if they have a question or an issue, come to you as their representative, because you are their voice here on the Roundtable, and then you bring that to the body as comments and issues that need to be addressed. Does that make sense? Does anybody have another way that you'd like to do that?
I think that's all good and well, that should be the protocol, but we cannot stop our residents from reaching out on their own. And so, it's good to get that word out. And if you have a subcommittee group that's working on it, which Brisbane does, so we can try to air some of these things out. But I think it's really difficult to limit how residents can contact a group or a body that's a public body.
Okay. So would it be fair to give James the authorization to copy you, for instance, with a response that politely says, I understand, I've received your comment and request, and I'm forwarding it to your Roundtable representative and for further discussion or update. Yes, Ann.
I'm fine with that. James, I try when I'm talking to my constituents to point them both to SFO and to the website so that they do their homework, because this is technical and it takes a long time to come up to speed. Are you getting people who are just brand new and they're just trying to wonder where to start? Or are you getting the more advanced questions which I may not be able to answer?
First of all, I appreciate you fielding the questions and everybody else, I really do. I'm getting both. So on some of the questions that I'm able to quickly refer people to reports that we've done, minutes, videos, or work that the Noise Abatement Office has done, I'd be glad to point them in that direction. Other times we get very specific questions, pages of them. And a lot of times that comes towards me to maybe give to the consultants. And what I really need help with is, again, having that discussion with the board or with the committee so it could be able to assign and prioritize, which is kind of the premise of the discussion. So a lot of times I am having to tell individuals, yes, this is an item that may come up for a conversation, but you should also, discuss this with your representative on the board. So, so I'm kind of getting both ends of that, and I try to feel it as best as I can. But again, I feel like sometimes there are some messages that come in with the expectation that something's going to be on the agenda, something's going to be answered, and so I kind of have to be the messenger there that doesn't want to get shot. So, so I think that that's really where this is coming from, and this is something that I've discussed with Elizabeth and Ricardo and staff and everything. And I think that we just want to try to create a way that we can vet the questions, prioritize that, so we can be more efficient, and we can have Jean and Justin also focus on answering those questions. That again, a lot of them may be overlap as well. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we have some direction on that then. Thanks, Sue.
Complicated by, I certainly see your point, what you're talking about, because otherwise we as a roundtable group are not choosing our priorities. We're forcing you to, but also in our, and I know in my community, and we work closely with Brisbane, our residents are much more technical understanding than I am. So I think for us, for me, it is very helpful for them to come and meet with me so that then we can formulate and get to you to bring before us, so that then we all will look at each of those and prioritize them for the, along with that, I think maybe we don't meet enough times.
Okay. Maybe not. This is a very long agenda. I don't know that we're going to finish by 9 o'clock, but any other discussion on this item? If not, I'll close it, and we will go on to item number 10, which is a follow-up from our September 13th technical working group meeting, which was, I have to say, pretty lonely without all of you there to be with us, but we forged on with members of the public. And one of the, before I get Gene into giving his summary, the other item here is to discuss a possible future meeting time to accommodate more people's work schedule, possibly over the lunch hour. And to bribe you a little bit more, we will provide a box lunch for those who are coming, just for the members, not the public. I'm so sorry, but you can bring your own. But you know, just to help accommodate everyone's busy schedule. So, any input on that? Does that sound like a good idea?
Yes, very helpful for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're just talking about the technical working group?
Technical working group. You've been to a few of them?
I have not, but I will go.
Oh, good.
Especially if you serve food.
Yeah, yeah, a little sandwich. Okay. Jean, you want to do your little report here? Item number 10.
Sure. So at the last technical working group, it was really a movement away from just focused on the initiatives, going through them, and really working on the work plan, which a lot of the work plan stemmed from the initiatives and the results of the initiatives and the questions that we've been asking the FAA. And a lot of the discussion at the working group lended itself also to what Elizabeth talked about in the previous section 9, agenda item 9, is starting to then prioritize these. And because not everybody is on the technical working group, we wanted to really reach out and get some prioritizations from each of the members. So that's why that agenda item number 9 preceded this one, so that we could get out in front and not just a handful of us deciding what the priorities are, but really hearing from each of you to start to prioritize those work plan items. And so we want to also look at, based off the work plan, also help us to come up with generating those questions, because a lot of the questions to the FAA are coming out of the technical working group and probably should come out of the technical working group, because they're the ones that are focused on the issues and the work plan and figuring out, you know, the questions we want to ask the FAA. There was some discussion for the next technical working group, things we're going to do, and when we're meeting. I believe it is November 8th. We did set that.
October 18th? No. November 8th? Okay.
November 8th, I think, is the next technical working group meeting. And there was also a discussion, and we expect there would continue to be discussion or a presentation on GBAS. The technical working group is really like having those updates that regularly, and think it's prudent that it does come there so that we can help get the right people involved in some of those things as well. So that was basically the working group meeting, unless I missed anything.
So if we're going to ask if we could have FAA attend our next working group meeting, then we have to have those questions by October 8th. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And I believe there's some of us on the technical working group are meeting. I think we're having a phone call tomorrow to start to formulate those questions, because we got to get them out pretty early, basically this week. But I think what was presented here tonight really lent itself pretty well to the follow-up questions that we could have. I mean, there were some about, you know, can we put more offshore, for example? Can we, rather than do the city departure, go back to something like the Dumbarton? You know, the questions we didn't ask, so that they could go and review those things. So I don't know that it's a heavy lift, but it will then, if we can get them at the technical working group, I think that is going to be a better forum to get the give and take and to find the solutions.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mindy, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think there's a possibility that we could also have representatives for our technical working group, which meets on the off month that the roundtable doesn't? So it'd be once a month that we would have FAA representation.
So I would say I hope so, but I'm not sure the answer. I will take that down to.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Chair, I vaguely remember in the last conference call that we had that there was interest.
With Fabiola and
yes,
those
that
guys?
he had that
Okay.
indicated that, so I have some confidence that was strong interest.
All right. Any questions or comments about this agenda item? If not, I'd like to move on to item number 11, because we have a number of residents in the audience about that. And I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's going to come as a real big surprise to everybody in this room that I want to talk about backblast, and I'm sure Councilmember Schneider is going to join me in that. So, and I think we've broken every protocol of how to bring something up and prioritize it, and so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to bring it up again and to talk about the creation of a subcommittee. And at the end of the day, what my purpose is to find a way to get a study done about our backblast, to specifically look at infrastructure changes, procedural changes, and now that NADP1 was just described, I think Councilmember Schneider brought up a really good point. We would love to know how that impacts a backblast, and that would be part of the study. So the subcommittee would be getting together to work to create some questions that we would want answered in the study. And with that, I'll give it back to you.
Okay. Well, we'll open it up to the roundtable members for any comments on this.
Here.
Yes, Sue.
So Pacifica actually is affected, so please don't forget us. We're definitely affected by that, and I think it's a good idea. It's another component of noise.
Any, Anne?
Brisbane and Pacifica hosted a meeting a week ago that I attended, and their representatives talked about airplanes when they're still at a fairly low altitude are potentially hitting that backblast as they fly over a community. So it might be a greater geographical area than just the three of us that Hillsborough, Burlingame, and Millbrae. But until we figure out what the questions are and ask the right questions and put the monitoring devices, we don't know. So I think this is great. I hope that the rest of the roundtable will support it. And I am guessing that there are members in the audience who are also talking about additional ground-based noises. And I talk to my constituents all the time about one success story we had with IVAR's help with APUs, auxiliary power units, being run longer than their contract or their lease allowed. So we could at least clip a little bit of that noise down. But having this committee, I don't know, Councilman Ortiz, if you're open to looking at noise in addition to backblast or low frequency noise. But I think we've got members in the audience who are going to speak on that tonight.
Okay. So any other roundtable member have a comment on this? Supervisor Pine.
I think it's terrific that this focus is being brought on the backblast issue. You know, my instinct would be to keep it focused on that, because I do think it's a very distinct problem that has its own unique set of issues, and I'd be concerned if other noise problems were combined with it.
So your definition of the ground-based noise backblast would be more narrowly defined?
Yeah, I don't know if I think some people are probably define it better than I can, but it's maybe Ricardo, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts when I think about what we're talking about exploring is the noise generated by planes taking off versus planes flying overhead. Right. So in that respect, I'm sure there could be backblast once they're overhead. That's not what I was seeing as the study and the problem that I want to address.
Okay. Can I get a sense from other roundtable members about that concept? Terry?
I think that some of the, what I'd like to see, and this sort of overlaps to the next subject, is that we add a standing agenda item that deals with arrivals, departures, and then we could call it backblast or ground-based noise. I think that what we're talking about as backblast or ground-based noise is more of the low frequency, the vibration that happens on takeoff, and what happens at the airport with run-ups and generators and all the other noises that combine. But it would be good to have a noise threshold so we know what we're dealing with and where it's echoing and how it's affecting our communities.
So that would be something the subcommittee would have to research and define.
I think it would be good to have a standing agenda item for each of those three items, so that as concerns get brought up in this committee, we can have a quick discussion during our agenda and say, we're noticing this problem, or based on arrivals, departures, or ground-based noise, and we can have a small discussion on it and bring it back as a regular agenda item where we discuss those issues. And that could be fed by what's been said by the public and our group at a meeting, where it gets brought back at another meeting. And that may help some of the problems that James has with people asking questions of him and wanting answers, that they would have a place to say something that may get agendized at the next meeting. So it might help with some of the timeliness.
All right. Thank you. That's a good point. Al, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I am clearly supportive of the subcommittee to work on this. With respect to the definition, I guess I'd like to hear what the public has to say. I think they have more knowledge on this and they're more affected by it than we probably are. And I'd be interested in their perspective of how broad this definition ought to be. My gut would tell me you'd want to start out narrow with the potential to evolve it into something broader. But I would start first, walk or crawl before you walk and walk before you run theory.
Good idea. Okay. Any other roundtable? Sue?
I have two things, because I remember when the walls were put up because of the noise of the freeway. And what happened then is the noise hopped the walls and went over to other new parts. So I am concerned that we don't keep it too narrow, because we're going to have that same effect. The other thing with the standing, I think when we have something standing, it helps us to see our baseline and our growth each time, or lack thereof. And we won't have to have long, long conversations.
Okay. All right. All right. So at this point, I think that I'll open it up to the public, and then after that, then we will form our committee, call for volunteers. So we have 7 speaker slips for this agenda item, and it is now 9:07. So can I have a show of hands of who all have given me a speaker slip that want to speak on this item? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You haven't given me a speaker slip, Peter. You're going to slip one in on me, aren't you? I think I might, just because. All right. So, would you be willing to speak for a minute and express your? Because I'm sure that a lot of you have the same emotion or premise to speak, or do you want to give somebody, a representative, your time? You'd have to come up to here. And are you Peggy? You're Lynn Israelit?
I am.
Burlingame resident.
Yes. Is this on? Yes. I would, first of all, I would like to, before my 2 minutes start, I'd like to address your question. I think that all of us have taken 2 hours out of our evening to be here, and we understand that you guys had a lot of things to cover, but I think it's only fair that each person get 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you all agree. That has been, we've already lost 5 people who were planning on speaking and just couldn't stay any longer.
Your 2 minutes have started.
I would like to talk to you about backblast noise. I've lived in Burlingame for 8 years. I would tell people I live close to the airport, but I never hear sounds from the airport. It's not gross. Don't judge my neighborhood in that way. However, about 2.5 years, I don't remember exactly when, we were notified that work was being done on runways, construction was going to be done. It would affect the flights and noise that we would be hearing for the summer. And it just never, ever went back to normal after that. And I can tell you, it is horrendous. There are days when I am sitting in my home and I have to close all the windows. I have to use air conditioning. I don't want an insulated home that is airtight and soundproof. I want to be able to sit in my yard. I want to be able to sleep with my windows open. The sound is comparable to a summer thunderstorm, only it crescendos and diminishes, and it can be constant. It affects everybody's sleep. It's talked about in our neighborhoods. We started an ad hoc group and already have 150 members who are interested and have been coming to regular meetings. What I would like to specifically request is that I feel that these sound maps that we currently have, the sound exposure maps, are not accurate. It has 65 decibels being marked off at about the Highway 101 location, and it clearly goes well beyond that, enough to wake people from their sleep. I think that we need to have accurate sound studies that sound engineers are involved in. It is not up to the public to figure out what changed, whether it was, there are a lot of changes with the arresting material pad that was added to some of the runways, and they face us directly, or whether it's change in intersections and taxiing, but it has to be addressed.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Peggy McLaughlin, and then Julian. Peggy's from Hillsborough, and Julian is from Burlingame. That would be, what a good idea.
Great. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time, and I'll take less than 2 minutes because I know I already spoke. I do have to say I'm glad to hear that I wasn't the only one frustrated by the FAA question process, so that's encouraging. It's an evolving process. I think what we want to stress is that we are concerned about the change in noise. I've lived here for 23 years. Sound was never a problem. Certainly when there's storms, we expect the planes have to fly differently, and it's very noisy, and that's kind of exciting and different, and it passes. It's the relentless noise, and it's the noise in the middle of the night that is just atrocious. We cannot sleep with our windows open anymore, and what we'd really like is to have this body or somebody organize, sponsor, make sure that there is an independent noise study undertaken to help us understand what the issue is. And then we can all work together to fix the issue so that we can be good neighbors to the airport, which we love. I moved here, my husband and I moved here because we're by an airport, but we need it to be a good community for us also. And thank you to Ricardo and Ann and Al for leading this effort to have the roundtable pay attention. Also want to mention that could I just have a show of hands of everybody that's here on this issue that's not necessarily going to speak, just to And as Lynn mentioned, we already lost quite a few people. And we did ask folks to just give one example of the impact on their lives, because we appreciate that you're going to hear from a number of us.
Thank you very much. So Julian, and then the next is going to be Don Glaze, Hillsborough, and then Rhonda Dutton, San Mateo. Julian?
Hi, Mike. Yes, thank you so much. I wanted to follow up, and thank you to Congressman Ricardo for putting this on the agenda. And I wanted to also thank Lynn and Peggy.
Let's not get carried away.
He's, we have our...
Don't tell Jackie. Don't send him to Jackie.
But I moved from San Francisco to Millbrae in 2003. I really liked the peninsula, and because of that, I decided to buy a home in Burlingame in 2010. And airport noise never been an issue for me. I really love the peninsula. But I don't know exactly when, just over the, maybe since next gen, I don't know. Something just happened. I work from home 3 days a week, and thanks to Sally, she told me to start using the stopjetnoise.net. Believe me, I start like right before, I usually start working at 6 a.m., so I try to get up like a little bit before 6 a.m., but around 5 or 5 a.m. in the morning, I start hearing noises. And then until like sometimes I would start, like I would have my phone on and I would like stop, you know, like click it. I swear, every 2 minutes or so, I have to click because I hear the noise so often. And then one night, I couldn't even sleep until 2:30 a.m. I still could hear those noises. I think the only time where I don't hear any noise is from 2:30 to about 5:30. Those are the only times. And thank you to some of the community members here. When runway 1R was closed, that got reduced significantly, and I really was able to sleep very well. And again, we love our community, we love the peninsula, and we like SFO too. The reason why we wanted to live close to San Francisco, close to this area is because of SFO. But I think that I hope we can work as a community to come up with a solution. I don't know what the solution is, but I hope that we could come up with something together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Don Glaze, and then Rhonda Dunton, and is Aaron Zornis here? You did read his letter? Okay. And Rich Grogan, Burlingame. Don?
Yeah, I'm Don Claes. I live in Hillsborough, about 3.5 miles west of the airport. I've lived there with my family for 18 years. Haven't really had any noise problems of significance for most of that period of time. It's just really, it's been in the last year to a year and a half that the noise has gotten much more significant. It's louder during the day, but what's most bothersome is the noise at night. I'm sure there are more flights, which is one thing that contributes to it. And there's general background noise of the planes moving around, but when they take off, it's got to be takeoff noise. It's just extremely loud. So we're all sleeping with earplugs now. When we open the windows to get fresh air in, we've got to wear earplugs, and our neighbors are doing the same thing. So it really is a significant issue. I'm encouraged by the committee here wanting to look into it further. The thing I'd add is it's not the same every night. And I've tried to, so some nights are really, really loud, really intolerable noise, and others are really, pretty quiet. And I've tried to correlate it with wind direction, speed. There doesn't seem to be any correlation there. So it must be operational or different flights going out on different nights or whatever. But if we could get, a study that looked at, with the community, looked at what's going on at the airport, particularly on these nights where the noise is so severe, it would allow us to recommend some changes. So I appreciate you focusing on it. It really is a significant issue for us. Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Rhonda, and then Rich, if he's here, or Peter Grace.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Dunton. I moved to San Mateo about 8 months ago, and it was nice and rainy in February and March, and I didn't notice much of anything. And then in April, it's just been constant ever since. It's this really low continuous noise, and I started reporting it, and most of the time the software says cannot pick a flight. And that's because it's not a flight taking off or going over my house. It's the noise from the airport that's just this rumbling, rumbling, rumbling. And you don't even know when to hit the button because it's like you could just punch it because it just doesn't stop. It doesn't abate as if a flight were passing over. So last weekend, I discovered that I'd forgotten what it's like to be well rested because I was so well rested. When they closed 1R, we were able to fall asleep at 10. We didn't wake up until after 8. It was like, wow, we're really tanking up on sleep. My husband and I were so thrilled. And I was noticing in your literature here about nighttime power run-ups. I feel that the noise is particularly bad on Friday nights and Saturday nights and also Saturday mornings. And I wonder if, like, that's a time for some reason why, when they're doing a lot of that maintenance on the airplanes and they're just revving those engines on the ground. So I think if you could look into it and get really down to the details of, you know, that kind of operation, that may be a source of this noise that's on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rich. And then Peter.
Good evening. My name is Rich Grogan, and I live at the intersection of Halen, Columbus, and Burlingame, right at the direct line behind San Francisco Airport. And so the FAA understands, I hope this is being recorded, I want to be very specific. I'm requesting an independent study of a independent sound study to ask the airport to be forthcoming about what changes have been made to eliminate the noises that we're experiencing. Now, it doesn't take a genius. We just heard about NADP and the run-up that they just came about. It's a matter of physics. If you have a heavy plane that needs to go much faster, you need more energy. It takes energy to move mass. It's going to take a lot more throttle, a lot more exhaust noise. The backblast that we're getting is deplorable. I'm not going to repeat all of the things that I have experienced and my family's experienced because it's the same thing, the same noise, the same type, the same intrusion, the same violation. So I'm asking everyone, please look into this and eliminate the problem. Noise is noise. I don't care what causes the noise. It is noise, whether it's the run-up, the backblast, or the air brakes. The jet reversing of the engines. When they come in off a 2.8, 2.8 right particularly, and they overfly their touchdown, and they have to apply the brakes, it rattles my windows in my house. So please, help us.
Thank you. Peter?
Some of that might be helped with GPS.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's 20 minute ride.
My name is Peter Grace. I live in Brisbane, which is not Burlingame, so this is a slightly different view. Thank you, Ricardo Ortiz, for bringing up backblast. I've got 3 comments. One, the first comment is, if you go to the SFO live tracking site where you can do replays, where you can see where the flight paths go and the monitors, you can see both flights and noise readings. It's really important that those two are seen. What I see is that when flights come towards the monitors, the time that they flare the monitor is much longer after leaving the monitor flying over it than approaching it. Secondly, it's very clear that when flights take off runway 28 and turn towards San Bruno Mountain and then turn towards the bay, their engines face directly into Brisbane. There's a huge but less long-lasting effect than Burlingame. So I'd ask you to include in the scope, to include flights that are in the air, even though you said earlier not to. My third question is when you do the study, it's really important what noise metric is used. dBA is what the SFO Roundtable uses at the moment, and it was used for the Woodside and Portola Valley studies. There was a study done in Burlingame for the noise study where dBc was used. And I'd really ask you, that in this part of the thing, one of the things that's determined is what is the best metric to measure this effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. All right, I have no more public comments, so I'm going to bring it back to the roundtable body. Doug?
Well,
you need to get the mic.
First of all, I want to compliment all the folks who did stick around for a couple hours and just ask for 2 minutes. I think it's eminently reasonable. And I hope the FAA rep sees that while there's frustration here, we're not savages like you might have heard about other areas. We're actually quite reasonable. And I think this meeting is better than other meetings I've been to. And I see a glimmer of hope. And I really do look at Gene, and I want to pick his brain about how he feels he can navigate this shadow boxing process and actually get some progress here. But I want to go back to the backblast issue, because I thought I knew what backblast was when Ricardo brought this, or Congressman Ortiz. Last meeting, you were called Carlos, and tonight just shows if you stick around, you'll get a title you eventually like. But was it your intent, and was it the intent of Ann and others, and Al, to talk about all the noise from gate to takeoff? Because there's a lot of different operations and different noise profiles. And if in fact that encompasses everything, I'm curious about whether, that's the consensus. And then we also heard other ground-based activities like maintenance and run-up. I know you've talked about that, Ann's talked about that. When you talk about backblast, are you talking about everything that's ground-based and up to 1,500 feet in elevation?
Well, and the answer is there's many other ground-based noise that, and I think Councilmember Schneider brought it up, and we've talked about it, but the one that keeps me up at night and keeps, I think, some of our neighbors up at night, it has to do with the airplanes actually taking off. And it's funny you bring it up, because somebody mentioned to me that actually when they're slightly off the ground is where they're sending some sort of, was like a second wave of, so the backblast is not only the run-up on the runway, but actually when they're off the air, there's another blast. And again, I'm not an expert. Rich told me. So, so that's the kind of thing. Yes, the scope has to do with the takeoff more than an overflight. So in my mind, what we're talking about is not the backblast that you get when the plane is flying over you. It's actually just when it's taking off.
And are you talking about until it reaches about 1,500 feet or whatever, when they sort of throttle back?
Okay, I think that these questions, I think we'll call for volunteers for this committee. And with the committee, the members of that committee, we're going to have to structure a charter, some parameters for which you to study. Diane, I'd like to hear from you. Yes, hi there. I know, so far away.
Yeah, I'd limit it initially and expand out from there. I've spent a lot of time in Millbrae. I know about backblast. It's time to do something about it. So I think the subcommittee is a great way to get started. I can give you some volunteers, and then from there, hopefully we can do the independent test. And I concur. Thank you for sticking it out, because it was really important to hear from you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Ann, are you volunteering?
I'm volunteering. I've been running for 2
I'd really
years.
like to get to the volunteering.
I know. I'm not opposed to just concentrating on backblast at this moment if we have a standing agenda item, because I have 3 neighborhoods that get definite noise now, and we were able to remediate it. And they have been waiting patiently while we go through the FAA report that basically didn't do anything to help us at all. So I don't want to lose the fact that there are other types of noise. And I also, as I used to be a scientist, when you start a committee and you narrow it too much in the beginning before you've even had the chance to talk about it, you can't actually design your scope. So I hate to limit us too much. Let's get the working group together.
I'm just going to cut you off right here, because we're not defining the definition of the committee right now. I'd like to call for volunteers for the committee, and then between the members of this subcommittee. How many can we have, Mr. James? As long as it's not a quorum. 11.
I think the magic number we go for is about 5.
The magic number we usually go for is about 5 because you need to have 5. So we have Terry, Ann, Al, Sue, Dave Pine, and Carlos, Council Member Ortiz. Santana. I thought that was 6. Was that 6?
I think that was 6.
I think we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, so Terry, Dave Pine, Ricardo,
Ann Schneider, Al Royce,
Al,
and
Sue,
and Ricardo.
Got it. I think we'll be fine there.
Is that 6?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys huddle up, create a time between you guys how to meet, and.
This is an ad hoc committee. It's not a Brown Act.
It's an ad hoc committee. It's not a Brown Act. We're not. But I think members of the public can attend, just like our ad hoc legislative committee.
We'll do a public announcement and everything typical.
Because
once we coordinate among the volunteers what a good time would be.
Okay. I'm happy about this. It's been a long time coming. I think there's a song about that.
Also offer just as you form the scope of the committee, we have a noise committee as well that we've formed mainly about terminal kind of noise, interior, but we've expanded it to exterior noise. I think probably we'll have a representative there with you to understand the everything that we're looking at as well, and can help inform the scope of work.
Well, second to talking to the FAA tonight, this was the most important thing on our agenda, so I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to move forward quickly to let James give some information about item number 12, having to do with the work plan, and then we'll move through the rest of the agenda very quickly.
So I'm going to be super quick with this. So the reason it was put in there is that we are working on our work plan, and hopefully have something to consider at the next meeting. But what I want to try to do with this is, I've been taking some notes, and I'm glad that Councilmember O'Connell had brought up the idea of doing the 3 standing items, because that's essentially what I really wanted to do in having the work plan items as reoccurring items. That way there's always something that we're going to report on, has some accountability that we can have listed on there. So much to the annoyance of some of my coworkers, I've taken up an entire whiteboard at my office trying to take the work plan and create kind of buckets, if you will, and no surprise, came up to more or less the same 3 that Terry had brought up, that those are more or less the 3 areas that this group looks at. So I'm hoping that our next meeting, I will have that kind of come back a little bit more formulated and fleshed out, but that's definitely the area that we want to go. I want to try to make that as seamless as possible for both the members to follow along as well as the public to contribute with their concerns, but also take the items that that were coming up as far as what we're taking as priority items, so I think all that's going to kind of come together in a real seamless way. So stay tuned with that, and that's all I have on that item.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 13. I'm just going to announce real quickly. It was alluded to before. Ivor spoke to it. Congresswoman Jackie Spear is holding a town hall meeting regarding airplane noise at Skyline College Theater. You can go onto her website and get all the information. It's from 7 o'clock on Tuesday, October 23rd. I think everyone would find it very interesting. The next agenda item has to do with the FAA reauthorization. There was a letter that was sent to Senators Feinstein and all to John Thune and Bill Nelson regarding the FAA reauthorization. And Jean has more current information about what happened today. But I also want to let you know that our 3 Congress members, Spear, Eshoo, and Panetta, voted no on it, and in Eshoo's weekly update last Friday, she said that because it seems hollow because it calls for more studies, and she says, and I'm going to quote her, "My constituents don't need new studies to tell them that aircraft noise diminishes their quality of life because they experience it every day. What they need is for the FAA to take action to reduce the noise, and this bill unfortunately fails to do that. I will continue to work with the FAA and the many engaged constituents in my district until this issue is resolved, but this hollow legislation does nothing to address the issues of airplane noise." So as you can tell, the 3 members of Congress in our region who formed the select committee all voted no because it meant nothing. But Jean, I'll let you have the little update on that now.
So yes, what that letter was responding to was the House approval of the FAA reauthorization, which happened last week. I actually found out on my train ride over here today from Sacramento that the Senate actually approved the FAA reauthorization as well today, and it is sitting on the President's desk for signature. We also learned last week that they did a 7-day extension because it ended September 30. So knowing that 7-day extension, we were expecting something this week because they don't do that short term of an extension without the knowledge that they were going to actually pass it. So it did pass while your Congress members were opposed because it just did a lot of studies. I will say it's the first time I've seen an FAA reauthorization, 12 provisions specifically for noise.
Yeah.
While it may not go the direction that we all would like and get past studies and actually do something, it's clear that noise is an issue around the country, not just here, and that it's getting the attention of Congress.
Right. So that is a little positive part of it. Okay, going on to item number 15, which has to do with monitoring FAA published flight procedures and the potential community impacts. A week or so ago, our wonderful legislative aide and senior advisor to Jackie Spear sent us an email kind of bringing to our attention again that periodically the FAA publishes updated flight procedures, and it's called, what is it? Where is it? It's something, but she doesn't, we don't have time to review it. I think a lot of our residents do, but we've asked our consultant to monitor, which they typically do, but to bring to us any significant change in these procedures that may have an impact on our airports, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose. Do you want to?
I would say that's correct. So HMH generally watches this. We don't catch them all, but what we've asked Justin Cook to do is to actually look for those in the Bay Area specifically, and then to bring to light to this body to all those that we think could potentially have a noticeable effect.
Okay. And Ivar?
I'll just add, as part of the noise forum work too, this is an area of focus in that anyone can post on this without kind of an airport representative. And so there is a movement with the FAA to rewrite these procedures that would allow the airport to also be aware and sign off on these things that would give us that role as well to alert on community issues.
Just seems like as much transparency as we can bring to the roundtable from what's happening so that we're not blindsided by big changes. That brings us to other matters, and I think, Jean, you got a really brief aviation noise news.
I would consider what I've already given the aviation noise news. It was all about reauthorization, okay, so I think we can.
Any member communications or announcements? Anne?
Millbrae is hosting a Japanese cultural event this coming Sunday. The weather should be good. It's really lovely. It'll be right here. Dancing, food, entertainment, bonsai, calligraphy. Please join us.
Just in case you guys don't know, the Blue Angels are in town on Friday. Actually, tomorrow. Tomorrow they'll be in town. Friday, flying over Saturday and Sunday. You want to talk about some airplane noise? Okie doke.
I have a question.
Sue. Okay, wait a minute.
I have a question. So when does the reorganization terminate? How many years is that? The reorg that was just authorized?
The reauthorization bill, it's a 5-year long-term bill, so 5 years.
Oh, good. So put it on our agenda.
Yeah, okay. All right. Call for motion to adjourn. Thank you all. Thank all of you members of the public.
Tell me. I'm
sorry. I think it was a short agenda tonight. Maybe because I only got called in.